Hello again and welcome to another Mordy and Glory Old World video. In today's episode we shall be casting our ever critical eye over another Old World unit. And once again we shall be returning to my personal favourite faction of the game, the Empire of Man. Now, we've looked at some of their professional soldiers in the past, the state troops and the missile troops, and we've also had a little gander at some of the militia, such as the archers and the Free Company. But today, we are going to be delving into the best of the best of the best, the finest infantry that the Empire can call upon. I am, of course, talking about the Empire Greatswords. And so, without further ado, let's summon the Elector Counts and charge right into today's episode. As is tradition, let us begin with a brief overview of what the hell this unit actually is. The Greatswords are, to a man, grizzled veterans of combat, each one highly decorated and hand-picked to serve in the ranks of the Greatswords by their commanding officers. You cannot buy your way into this unit. You must prove yourself worthy to be a Greatsword. One very badass, if not a little tragic bit of lore about the Greatswords is each one vows never to give ground to the enemies of the Empire, and often this means they end up fighting to death. The history of the Empire is rich with examples of brave Greatswords fighting to the last man, their standard being the last thing to fall on the battlefield, even when the rest of the army might have retreated, run away, or died. So if you're a budding and prospective Empire player and you're looking for a unit of veteran infantry that is stubborn to their bones and can fight like devils, the Greatswords are for you. Well, at least that's how it is in the fluff. But what about the crunch? How do the Greatswords perform on the tabletop? Well, to find out, let's now deep dive into their unit entry, and we'll start off with their stat line. Each Greatsword has a movement of 4 inches, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 3, strength 3, toughness 3, 1 wound, initiative 3, 1 attack, and leadership 8. This means that they have a better weapon skill and base leadership than your average state trooper. You can also upgrade one of the Greatswords to a Count's Champion, which is going to give him an additional weapon skill, putting him at a very impressive weapon skill 5, and he's also going to have 2 attacks. Each Greatsword is going to cost you 11 points per model, and to upgrade one of them to the Count's Champion, that's going to be 8 points. Now, this is a bit of a price increase over your usual state troops. You can take a Halberdier for 6 points, a Greatsword 11 points. You're almost getting 2 Halberdiers for 1 Greatsword, and the Count's Champion in total is going to points. Big question is, do we think this is worth it? In my mind, I think Empire Greatswords are a fantastic choice, and there's a couple of good reasons for this, and we'll get into more of the nitty-gritty now. We're just focusing on the stat line. You might be thinking, well, is it really worth spending almost double the points for 1 more weapon skill and 1 more leadership? The extra weapon skill combined with the extra leadership means that Greatswords can kind of look after themselves. Now, in an ideal world, your units in the Empire are going to be supporting each other. You're going to have detachments. You're going to either swing in on countercharge or do a volley of shots first. You're going to have other units that might be able to come flying into the flanks. But there's always that situation when things don't go to plan. You might find that the opponent has a lot of longbows and just get rid of your detachments before they get to do anything. You may find that your melee attachments, for some reason, aren't able to come swinging in. Maybe there's already a bigger combat going on. Whatever may happen, there are a lot of circumstances that come together on the battlefield to mean that units will have to stand on their own 2 feet to prove their worth. Now, state troops might be able to hold out a bit of support. Great swords will be. Because of the additional weapon skill, it means that they are tougher to deal with. Because most of the time when you come across enemy infantry and they've got a better weapon skill than you, well, they're going to hit your state troops on 3s because you're weapon 3, they're weapon skill 4, so they're hitting you on 3s. But great swords being weapon skill 4 means that unless something truly elite comes along, and we're talking something well out of the realms of your usual core and special choices, even for a lot of special factions or intense factions, we can say, that like to be up close to person, like orcs and goblins. They often have things like black orcs, and you've also got, you know, your warriors of chaos who are typically weapon skill 4. It means that the vast majority of the time your opponent is going to be hitting you on 4s rather than 3s. This is something that I think a lot of people misunderstood when it comes to sort of weapon skill. You can look at it on how it's going to allow you to hit the enemy and do more damage, and that's great. But for me, I see weapon skill as a really fantastic defensive stat, especially in an Empire army where you're typically going to have a lot of infantry, which is holding the line, whilst the war machines do the work. So having that extra weapon skill means that less attacks are going to physically hit you. Going from hitting on 3 to 4 is a really, really big deal. And the extra leadership means that even without a character, they're actually pretty good at holding. And in fact, if you look at a lot of characters in the Empire, such as the captain of the Empire, they've only got leadership 8 anyway. So unlike state troops that almost need a captain to babysit them, and that's a bit of a hidden cost if you expect them to do more than just roll over and die, your great swords like, no, we can actually, with that leadership 8, with a BSB nearby, we're actually, with stubborn, because they do have that, and we'll get into that special rule in a moment, we're actually okay. We're going to be able to hold, we're going to be able to do our jobs here. Now, of course, they would enjoy an even higher leadership character like a general, and so, you know, if you can support them with, great. But for whatever happens, if you find yourself great swords on their own, they should be able to take the blow and hold the line. But it's not just their stat line which lets them do this. Let's move on to some of the other bits on the unit entry. Now, a couple of just important bits to point out. Troop type, regular infantry. So if you get flanked by unit strength of 5, your rank is interrupted. So try not to get flanked. Great swords. Base size, 25 by 25, normal infantry base. Unit size 5+, not 10+, 5+, but no detachment. You can't take great swords as a detachment unit. Now, to be clear, they can have detachments. They are regimental units. They can be the core and then the detachments go on the side. But you can't take a big block of state troops and have a... But the big thing here is their equipment. They've got hand weapons and great weapons. And most importantly, full plate armor. We'll come back to the weapons in a moment, but let me just gush over that full plate armor. That's going to give your Empire Greatswords a 4+ armor save. Full plate is a significant step up over heavy armor. And to be able to take it on models that are only 11 points each, suddenly that 11 points per dude doesn't actually seem too expensive. Suddenly that 11 points per dude seems like a great bloody deal, because you've got weapon skill 4+, making you defensive, and then full plate armor, which is giving you a better armor save than your Empire Spearmen, who are going to have a 5+ save with their shields and light armor. So it makes them really tough. And there are a lot of units out there which don't have a 4+ save, like the Greatswords. And I'm talking elite units too. We go over, and I'm talking relatively elite. They may not actually be in the special area, but let's look at Chaos Warriors. Chaos Warriors only have heavy armor now. Great swords have full plate. So if the Chaos Warriors want to match you in terms of defensive capabilities, they are going to need to take shield with the heavy armor, which is going to drastically cut down on the amount of attacks that they are putting out. Or those Chaos Warriors go for something like 2 hand weapons, or they go for bigger, great weapons themselves, at which point, okay, they've got either better attacks or slightly stronger attacks, but they don't have as good defensive stat line. So the full plate armor is really, really. I mean, full plate genuinely puts you on a similar level as things like Dwarf Ironbreakers. Now, Dwarf Ironbreakers are very much the quintessential and possibly one of the best holding units in the game, because they get their shields as well, and then they get Gromwell Great Armor. So they're on a 3 up rerolling 1s. But just looking at the armor of the Ironbreakers, they have a 4+, and your Empire Greatswords. So it just gives you an idea of, like, yes, that the other units like Ironbreakers can take it even further, but those units cost significantly more than Greatswords. For Greatswords to even be at the same table is really, really potent. So I think with the weapon skill and the full plate armor, these guys are going to be proper tough to shift. And they go from just being, oh, a unit which is going to hold, to a unit which is going to start doing damage. Leads me on to the weapons. Because presuming your Greatswords get charged, then the enemy is going to do a whole bunch of attacks on them, which they're going to save quite a lot of them. Then the Greatswords get to strike back. And with great weapons, they're going to be striking back at strength 5, AP -2. So if any kind of line infantry unit, anything like a normal mob of orcs, or Onian men-at-arms, or Marauders of Chaos, or even the aforementioned Warriors of Chaos, or Beastmen Gauls, anything like that, anything that goes into them is going to bounce, it's going to do some damage. Maybe 1 or 2 of the Greatswords go down, and the Greatswords are going to turn around and start hacking them down, because they're probably going to be hitting back at 3s, and they're going to be wounding a lot of the time on 3s, if not 2s. Strength 5 with the Greatswords, and then the enemy's not getting a save. So I feel like a very predictable pattern that could emerge with Greatswords is the enemy gets the drop on them, the enemy suddenly finds out how drawable these guys are, and then the enemy ends up taking more casualties. Greatswords might cost almost, if not double, what a lot of other enemy line infantry cost. But I confidently believe that they will happily take that on and kill their number and their worth in points, just because they're going to be taking less damage and they're doing. Now, moving on to the options for the unit, the Greatswords don't have any weapon or armor option. Not like State Troops, where you can swap out spears, halberds, take shields, and they've got nothing like that. Your options essentially boil down to special rules and full command. So any unit can upgrade 1 model to a counter champion, as we discussed, for 8 points, and then you can upgrade 1 model to a standard bearer for 6 points, upgrade 1 model to a musician for 6 points. You're going to take all of those because you want to have the standard bearer to help with combat resolution, and you're going to want the Count's Champion because it's an extra attack. It's 8 points for an extra attack rather than 11 points for an extra greatsword, which will get you an extra. Definitely want the. And the Musician is going to be good because if you end up getting into a drawn combat, win the drawn combat, and if the unthinkable happens, you flee, you'll be rallying on leadership 9 because you want to rally, which is cool. The best bit here, and I think a bit of a hidden gem, is a Count's Champion may purchase magical items. Now, a lot of the time when you've got a unit leader that can take magical items, it's like you can take up to 25 points. The Count's Champion can take up to 50 points of magical items. He is essentially a mini Captain of the Empire. If you compare their stat lines, you can compare what's important. The Count's Champion has the weapon skill of 5+, ballistic skill 3, but you don't care about that. And you know, strength 3, toughness 3, and 2 attacks and leadership 8. If you look over at the Empire of the Captain of the Empire, weapon skill 5, same weapon skill as the Count's Champion. Look over at the strength. Okay, strength 4. This is strength 3, but don't forget that the Count's Champion is going to have strength 5 because of the Greatsword. So actually, in the same ballpark. You've also then got the fact that they've both got 2 attacks and they've both got leadership 8. So the only advantage that the Commander of the Empire has is toughness 4, which doesn't matter because the Count's Champion is in a unit of blokes, so those guys are going to die first, so his toughness doesn't matter so much. 2 wounds, fair play, but again, not going to matter so much when the other bloke's going to die first. Challenges could be a thing, could be an issue. be fair, and does have a higher initiative, which doesn't mean a huge amount because obviously my greatsword is going to be striking last because of the weapon. Commander, the Empire had a great weapon, same thing. So it's not quite the same. You know, fair play, he's missing out on 1 toughness, and fair play, he's missing out on 1 wound. But in terms of like offensive output, same weapon skill, same attacks, and also same leadership, which helps for sticking around. But the Captain of the Empire costs 45 points, and the Empire Greatsword Couch Champion only costs 19, and they both get to take 50 points worth of magical items. So you can, for all intents and purposes, you don't need to put a Captain of the Empire into a unit of Greatswords. They basically come with a Wish.com Captain of the Empire in the Couch Champion. But the big question is, what magical items give your champion? Well, if you're anything like me, your first instinct will be to give him a better weapon. But I don't really think he needs one, or he has the profile to take advantage of. For example, the great weapon that he comes with, and sorry for the pun here, but it's a pretty great weapon. He's getting +2 strength, he's getting extra AP out of it. Sure, he's striking last, but so is his whole unit. I'm not sure if there's really any, and with only being initiative 3, I'm not sure even if he did get a weapon that made him strike at normal initiative and gave him like +1 strength, +1 AP, something like the Sword of Might, something like that. I'm not even sure if that would be any better for him. I think most of the time he's going to be striking behind his foes, because most foes are going to be either initiative 3 or higher anyway. So then I started thinking about other items you could give him. I thought, well, you could give him some armor, but he's only got 1 wound. Worth it. And then I started looking at enchanted items. Now, enchanted items can be taken by anyone. I double checked. It's arcane items that can only be taken by wizards, but enchanted items seem good to go. And there were 2 that jumped out and made me think this is pretty funny. I don't know if it's good, but it's pretty funny. The first one, and I think one is possibly the best option, is the Ruby Ring of Ruin. Ruby Ring of Ruin is only 30 points, so it's well under the 50-point limit. The wielder of the Ruby Ring of Ruin can cast the Fireball spell from the Law of Magic, as described on page 1, as a bound spell with a power level of 2. That's just an extra spell. An extra spell that you can just push out there from the Ruby Ring, and yeah, sure, your opponent might just spell it. It's literally a power level 2. But it's still something they're going to have to dispel. They might not have a wizard nearby. If they do, it's another chance that they might end up miscasting. It's a pretty decent weapon to be able to just go out there and just Ruby Ring someone. Another thing you could do is go for the Wizarding Hat, which is funny because I would love to see a Couch Champion with a pointy hat. The wearer is a level 1 wizard and knows 1 randomly generated spell from a Law of Magic of your choosing. However, the whispers of the ghostly wizard haunting the hat are often confusing. Therefore, the wearer also becomes subject to the stupidity special rule. Now, stupidity won't be so bad because you leadership 8. That's fine. Being a level 1 wizard means that you can actually cast spells properly. 2d6, it'll be 2d6 plus 1, but it means that it's going to make it a bit more tricky for your opponent to dispel them, especially if you rely on it. So I quite like the idea of the Wizarding Hat because it means that it's not just a spell that your opponent could spell out of hand, one they might actually have to effort in doing so. But it is 45 points. There are all sorts of other things that you could go for. I imagine Potion of Strength, which is 25 points, is once per game, adds D3 to your strength characters. That could be pretty good. Potion of Speed could be good for the initiative. A lot of different things that you could go for. But I think, for me, I would definitely be interested in going for a Ruby Ring of Ruin on the count. But that's just me. I just like the idea of giving this guy some magical equipment. But what do you guys think? Do you have any cool ideas for what magical items the Couch Champion could take advantage of? Let me know down in the comment section. Or would you leave him bare bones? Is he just challenge fodder, for lack of a better term? Again, let me know down in that comment section what you would do with the Couch Champion. But moving swiftly on, let's see what the last options are. 0 to 1 unit per 1,000 points may have the drilled special rule for 2 points model. Or, well, not or, and if you really want, they could have the veteran special rule for 1 point model. Drilled is a pretty interesting rule, and I think well-skilled players will be able to take advantage of it. Unless you are fleeing, you can have a free redress of the ranks before you move. Now, the way I see it being used is twofold. One, you can see in a future turn that you are about to get charged by something gnarly. Maybe it's a lance of Bretonnian knights, maybe it's a big horrible monster. But either way, you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to take a few casualties here. I'm going to need some sweet rank bonus to try and live out this thing through static combat res. So you would redress the ranks and you would go into a longer column. Maybe you'd go like, let's say you got 30 greatswords, you'd go 6 by 5. Or maybe if you got 20 greatswords, you'd be like, I'm going to go 5 by 4. That is one way you can use it defensively. Other ways you can use it aggressively. And you well, what is in front of my unit of greatswords? Maybe after deployment, you think, well, actually, what's in front of me is something I think I'm going to be able to, even if I don't get the charge off on it, I think I'll be able to beat the crap out of it. So to do that, I need as many attacks as possible. Like, I'm not going to need combat res to win this thing, static combat res to win this thing. I'm going to be able to do damage. At which point you think, right, well, I'll redress the ranks and I'll go for more attacks if possible. This could be quite useful if you're facing, even if you're facing like lone monsters, like just like a troll or two. Think, yeah, no point in me having lots of ranks here. I want to just cut this troll down, have a great time. So if you want to go for more attacks, you could redress the ranks into a wider formation, and maybe you go for 10 by 3 if you've got 30 great swords, or you go 10 by 2 if you've got 20 great swords. But either way, you're going to increase the amount of attacks that you've got. Drilled also means that you can march without having to take a leadership test if there's a unit within enemy unit within 8 inches of you. The thing about drilled is, whilst it has a lot of potential uses, 2 points per model, putting your greatswords up from 11 to 13 points is expensive. And I think one of the great things about greatswords is that they are cheap for elite infantry. You know, they are 11 points per model, so in comparison to a lot of Empire stuff, they might seem expensive. But in terms of elite infantry that are coming with good weapons, good armor, decent leadership, decent weapons skill, they're a good bargain. Certainly spend a lot more. Now, you go and ask some of the dwarf players how much they're spending on their hammerers and their ironbreakers, and they'll tell you that 11 points is a damn good deal. Damn good deal, sir. You compare that to, and I'm going off the top of my head here, so please forgive me, but I think, is it Lothran Seaguard? They're just a high elf 4 choice, and they're just standard spearmen that come with bows, and they've got spear, shield, and bows. I think they're coming at like 11, 12 points. And sure, the Seaguard do get stand and shoot, and they can get a free redress before people charge them and all sorts of things, but they're still spending the same amount of points on what is essentially a core choice in comparison to your special choice. So I think greatswords being relatively cheap, a good bargain as far as high quality infantry go, is one of their best strengths. And I think suddenly taking that and adding on 2 points for drilled and maybe like 1 point for veteran as well, to me it just suddenly feels like you're going to be spending a lot of points on special rules that might situationally come up. I'm not sure that's worth it. Just as a side note, veteran allows you to re-roll a leadership test with this unit, but break tests are not tests. Now, if break tests were, this would be an auto include on every unit, like giving the unit a free BSB. But as it is, it doesn't do that. It is good for leadership. It is good for, I think, things like fear tests and stuff like that. But I'm not sure if you need veteran if you're taking a battle stand. Long story short, I'm thinking you leave drilled and veteran at home unless you need them for your local meta. If you know that you're going to be taking a lot of leadership tests, you need veteran. If you know that you're going to be needing to be tactically flexible, or you know that you're going to have enemies that are going to be trying to nip all around you like wood elves and beastmen, you're going to have to be marching whilst there's going to be units on your flanks within 8 inches of you, then go for drill. But otherwise, I think you are going to quickly inflate the cost of the greatswords significantly. The last thing you can do is purchase a magic standard worth up to 50 points for the Empire Greatswords. Now, there are a lot of different magical banners that you can take advantage of, but looking through the ones from the main book and the Empire of Man magic items, there are 2 that stand out as good contenders. First one is the Empire of Man Griffin Standard. Now, this is 50 points, so it's pricey. You're going to use up that entire magical standard allowance, but it's potent. When determining your combat result, a unit carrying the Griffin Standard can claim a rank bonus of +2 for each extra rank behind the first, rather than usual +1. To be clear here, this doesn't mean you can benefit from an extra rank. It means each rank is giving you +2 combat res. So if you are using your greatswords and they have got 1 complete rank after the first, that doesn't give you +1 combat res. That rank gives you +2. If you've got 2 ranks intact after the first one, each one of those ranks gives you +2, which means you get +4 combat res from those 2 ranks. This means that even a relatively shallow unit of greatswords in that aforementioned 10 by 3 formation is still going to be able to get a really tasty static combat res building up. And it means that not only can they do well on the combat res front from their ranks and standards and whatnot, but also means you can deploy them wider, which means you can get more attacks, which means they can do damage, allowing them to not only be tough but also fighty. In a similar vein, we have the War Banner, and this is from the main Big Blue book. When calculating its combat result, a unit carrying the War Banner may claim an additional bonus of +1 combat point. Now, the War Banner only costs 25 points, so it's much cheaper than standard, and all it does is give you a bonus +1 combat res. So if you had a unit of greatsword with a standard bearer, that would normally give you +1 combat. With the War Banner, essentially you're getting +2 from that flagman. Again, it means that if you are likely to be on the receiving end of a difficult fight, the enemy might get a few blows in first, they might get a few kills before you get to strike back, they might limit the amount of combat resolution you can get from doing damage to the enemy. Well, the War Banner might be the difference between holding or even winning that combat. But that just about covers all of the options for the unit. Let's take a look at their special rules. And surprisingly, they've only got 3, but they're 3 good ones. They've got Close Order, which means they have +1 to their combat resolution and also can claim up to 2 ranks for their bonus. And they are a regimental unit, which means they can have detachments, but they don't, like I said before, they don't have detachment rule themselves. So they can have detachments, but they can't be detachment. And finally, what is possibly their signature move, the greatswords have Stubborn. Stubborn means that the first time this unit is required to make a break test, it may choose not to. You can just go, no, I'm not going to take that break test. And instead, you automatically fall back in good order. Now, and that's even if the unit strength of the winning side is more than double. So there could be a handful, 5 or 6 Empire Greatswords left, outnumbered by 50, 60 goblins. And as long as it's the first time they're taking that break test, before you roll the dice, you can go, no, we're stubborn, we're going to fall back in good order. It just means that for the first time anything charges into the Empire Greatswords, no matter what happens, you know that they're going to be okay. Now, there is, of course, ways you can bait out this. If the greatswords get hit by an overwhelming magical or ranged attack, if they take 25% of their casualties from shooting, then you might trigger that stubborn. It just says the first time the shoot is required to make a test. So if you take your first break test and you choose not to use stubborn, it doesn't mean you're saving it in the bank or using it for anything. It is very simply the first time you are required by whatever means take a break test, you can choose to fall back in good order. Obviously, people, like I said, they can bait it out Fortunately, it's going to be war machines that are more likely to do this to you than anything else. The pitter-patter of light firepower against your full plate armor is not something I would be too worried about, even when you've got some pretty horrible firepower out there. But I think that the ability to take a charge and just go, doesn't matter how many casualties we take, as long as we're not wiped out, we're falling back in order, that's really nice. It allows you to set up your greatswords to receive a charge, fall back, and then the next turn they can go charging back in, and you might be able to start doing some flank charges or support them back in with some reserve units, things like your own knights or other. But that just about covers it. Overall, I think that the greatswords are a really good unit. They are some much needed eliteness in an army which is otherwise a lot of 3s across the board on stat lines, a lot of weapon skill 3, a lot of leadership 7, and all this kind of stuff. Just being able to have a unit which has got better weapon skill and can make use of that weapon skill with their great weapons. I think they're phenomenally tough when it comes to Empire infantry. To be clear, they're still only toughness 3. They're going to be getting hit a lot. No, not going to be getting hit a lot, but they're going to get wounded a lot. But the full plate armor with the weapon skill makes them a lot more durable than a lot of your other out there. And they're cheap enough where you can kind of get around that toughness 3 by having a lot of bodies unit. I also really like how characterful the unit is, with the Count Champion being a miniature character in his own right, and you being able to give them a nice magical standard as well. I think the big thing with Empire Greatswords is going to figure out how many you take, and in a weird sort of way, they could compete quite strongly with regular state troop. If you're looking for blocks of infantry which can get hit in the face and take it, then greatswords are your choice. I did a little bit of the old math hammer before recording this video, and I was having a bit of a chat in the Morning Glory Discord with some of the people in there as well, and we were discussing, greatswords versus state troops. And one of the arguments that came up was, well, you could take like 30 greatswords, but you could also take halberdiers and use magic like the Oaken Shield to give those halberdiers like a 5+ ward save. And when we worked it out, you could get it was about the same. It was about 30 halberdiers with a level 2 mage with full command. It was the equivalent of just 30 greatswords. Or was it 30 spearmen? It might have been, I think it was halberdiers. It was halberdiers. So, and when we actually worked out, it's like, okay, so you've got 30 men in each unit, but one of them is only weapon skill 3. And only got a 6-up save. Sure, they've got a 5-up ward. So if we say the 6-up save and the 5-up ward are in the, are equivalent to a 4+ full plate, then okay, fair enough. But then you've got a unit of halberdiers which has got a character in there, is relying upon that spell to do the same as what the greatswords could just do innately, because the greatswords are just doing it on their own. And you're also relying upon that magic. What happens if someone dispels it? It's a level 2 wizard after all. Someone could have a level 4 and you're going to be in deep doggy doo-doo. It could just be dispelled. At which point you have spent more points trying to make halberdiers not as good as greatswords. We've spent the same amount of points to make halberdiers not as good as great. So I feel like they definitely compete. And in my mind, I think if you're looking for durable blocks of infantry, the way to go is greatswords, and your core should be dedicated towards things maybe like your archers and your detachments. You're still going to want state troops, but I think in like detachment form. And I think also you're going to, I think Empire Knights are core. Oh, that's where your core goes. And if you're looking for a big block of durable infantry, I think greatswords are potentially too. But I think what the argument between greatswords and state troops really lies is how cheap you can actually spam your state troop. Because if you don't try and make halberdiers as durable, we're just going to go for pure numbers and that's going to carry the day, then you can actually take 56 halberdiers with full command for the cost of 30 greatswords with. And suddenly what you end up finding is you've got your block of 30 halberdiers has got 2 detachment halberdiers. And so when the main block gets charged, the others can come around the side and hit them. Or you don't take halberdiers and you take like a detachment, maybe not quite as big, maybe like 2 10-man detachments. Handgunner, similar, right? The point is, I think greatswords are really good and they can compete strongly with state troops, but don't try and make your state troops as good as your greatsword. Lean into what makes your state troops good, which is how cheap they are, and basically how you can get lots and lots of attachments. But I know that's a little bit of a rambling sort of example at the end, but I thought it was important because people are going to be asking themselves, well, which blocks of infantry should I include in my army? And I think if you're looking for one block that's going to do a great job of just holding, greatswords are the way to go. I think if you're looking to overwhelm the enemy through numbers and really lead into detachments, then I think state troops are the way to go. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. What is your opinion of the Empire Greatswords? Are they great or are they terrible? And how many would you take in a unit? And what kind of upgrades would you give them? And would you give them any characters to lead them as well? Because we've kind of looked at this in isolation. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Marcus Roberts, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.